The N64 is not known for its quality of fighting games. In fact, it would be easy to count them all on one hand perhaps, and so when developers were looking at game types, the choice of a fighting game would make sense. After all, with such little competition on the console, all they'd have to do is create one half decent and it would sell quite well to the starved fans who owned the console. Fighter's Destiny is a 1998 release by Ocean, which was developed by the Genki team at Imagineer. The game is also known as Fighting Cup in Japan, but whatever you call it, this game is definitely one of the best beat-em-up experiences to be had on the console. Drawing inspiration from more realistic fighting games such as Virtua Fighter and Tekken, Fighter's Destiny has enough creativity and unique selling points to help it stand out from the crowd. Thankfully, these aspects of the game couldn't be found on any other game at the time, and it's clear to see that the game had a well-structured development and talented staff to deliver on their ambitions. When playing Fighter's Destiny, you'll quickly notice that there are in fact two bars for each character. The first is a health bar, and the second comes in the form of a power bar, but unlike many other generic fighters, the game employs a point system for its battles, and one which you need to get your head around quickly if you're to develop as a player. You can score points in 4 ways. Firstly, to get 2 points you need to knock your opponent down to the ground. This is harder than you may think to, given the physics in the game, and as you'll only gain 2 points, it's a scoring method you should find yourself rarely aiming for. Secondly, you can knock your opponent out of the arena. You'll only gain a single point for doing this, and so even with your opponent on the edge, you should challenge yourself to try and pick up more points by scoring in other ways. Next, for 3 points you can execute a throwdown or counter a special move, so knowing your character's moveset and strengths really helps you to rack up the points. Finally, you can perform one of your character's special moves for 4 points. As you get to the latter part of the game, you need to know these like the back of your hand as the enemies become technically very challenging. The points-based system means that you can turn a battle around very quickly if you have the skill and foresight to plan your attack and defense methods ahead of your opponent. With so many fighting games gifting the aggressive game a victory, it's nice to see a game that takes defense as seriously as its attacking mechanics. Speaking of the characters, they all have their own unique strengths, which you'll need to find one to complement your gameplay style. Aside from the usual slow and powerful and quick but weak tropes we're used to, the characters have combat styles such as karate, wrestling, and even dirty tricks from Pierre the Clown. The characters cover fighters from across the globe, to total 10 to choose from, with few very unique ones to unlock in addition to the standard core fighter base. The slight issue is that the balance between fighters. Some are actually superior to others. Without spoiling the game, there are certain ones you'll need to find yourself playing more often than others. It does take away the skill when playing the computer, but when you play a friend then things should be a little bit more balanced. Graphically, the game shines in a lot of areas. The frame rate rarely ever drops below a smooth 30 frames per second, and there are some fantastic visual effects thrown in. When you perform a point scoring manoeuvres, you'll get a brief replay of the levels of animation above what you'd normally see in other fighters of the time. However, some of the backgrounds can be a little bland and certain characters have issues with clipping when getting close to your opponent, but it doesn't ruin the game. The characters themselves all look the part and are not the usual stereotypical look you'd expect based on the country they're representing. The sound effects now are really awesome, and the noises for high impact moves sounds bone crushing at times, and this is enhanced further by the crowd cheering as you do so. The music is a standard MIDI based fare which is neither great or weak, and often you'll hardly notice it's there because you're so engrossed in the game, which I think is certainly a good thing. The key to any fighter is having responsive controls, and thankfully Fighter's Destiny comes up trumps. The game controls with the D-pad, and surprisingly only 2 buttons are used for attacking. This may sound limited, but the combos are easy to pull off, and this works to the game's advantage, not using the awkward C buttons like so many other N64 fighters forced upon you. This makes it clear that Fighter's Destiny was a game designed from the ground up to be played on the N64 controller, and this has resulted in perhaps the most intuitive control system found on any of the console's fighting games. With lots of game modes at offer, including the Master's Challenge whereby you win or lose moves by facing a Russian roulette of opponents, Fighter's Destiny has enough depth to make an essential purchase. The game received generally positive reviews on launch, but only sold a modest number of copies. I find this surprising as these days it's somewhat of a hidden gem on the console. Somehow it's been undermined by below subpar fighters from the bigger franchise names. I got Fighter's Destiny on launch and loved it then, so I was a little reluctant to go back to it now. The good thing is, it has aged in the graphics department a little, but the gameplay is as fresh and unique as it was even back in the day. But how do you remember Fighter's Destiny? Did you skip this as it was from an unknown and unproven studio, or did you snap this up having been disappointed by the remakes of Mortal Kombat and updated Killer Instinct? As always, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and until next time.